You know, if I'm just sitting here trying to figure out what to say, because talking in the microphone is kind of what I do, and if I were doing it on a full-time basis in this chair, perhaps I'm just enjoying the kick-ass intro bed. This is well done. I am not Jake Query, but I'm obviously a voice you are used to hearing on this radio frequency. My name is Greg Rakestraw, and normally when I do a substitute teaching position here, there's like a 3-hour window that is involved. But it is the month of May, and everything goes a bit faster. So, like, for example, you have heard me the last couple of nights on trackside, filling in for Kevin Lee, who is rather busy in the month of May with his duties for Fox Sports, for all things Indianapolis 500 and all things NTT IndyCar Series. So that's an hour dose with a co-host. Today, I think I am in for 30 minutes, maybe an hour if it stretches, because Jake Query has sponsorship obligations during the lunchtime hour, or at least to start. I want to make sure that I get this. He has a union event at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I won't say which union because, frankly, multiple sponsors on this program, so I want to make sure I name the proper one. But Jake is doing a meet and greet, a Q&A, a luncheon behind the pagoda that has hundreds of Indianapolis 500 fans at it. And so hence you are stuck with me until Jake can meander his way through the throngs, the hundreds of thousands that are there to get his autograph and make his way to the third floor, well, what used to be the cafeteria, but has become the Fan and WIBC studios during the month of May. A place where I was on for 2 hours on Saturday, a place where I'll be on for 5 hours this coming Saturday, and a place where I'll be on for 3 of 4 hours this coming Sunday. Because it is the month of May in Indianapolis. Now, Eddie Garrison is on the other side.
Good afternoon.
I will go to your old Soccer Saturday name, Garricino. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You can still use that in other programs, even though you are no longer the producer for Soccer Saturday, by the way. What has the percentage over the last few days been of conversation on this show, say, between Indiana Pacers and Indianapolis 500? What's that ratio been like?
It's probably 80-20, just because, the Pacers game just wrapping up and
Sure.
Practice is just starting. Had the Rainfield practice on Tuesday, so a little bit more towards 500 yesterday, but we still talked a lot Pacers.
How much in the way of Indianapolis Colts have you discussed over, say, the last couple of days? Just keep it this week. How much Colts conversation has there been the last 2 days?
Not a ton. Not a ton.
Okay. And there, frankly, hasn't been a reason to have that until last night. And thankfully, from a Colts schedule standpoint, yes, there's activity at the Motor Speedway. And believe me, I have the video feed turned on in the room as we speak. I have the IndyCar telemetry turned on as we speak. Guys like Herta and Erickson, you just heard Brendan King. Tony Kanaan had the track to himself and turned 43 laps earlier today. But looking like this is going to be by far the warmest day of the month of May, or at least of this practice window, as temperatures will get cooler. And even though there's the potential for strong storms later, in terms of just the 6-hour window at the Motor Speedway, probably this might be the best afternoon to make sure you get everything you need in. Things will be busy early because you don't know weather-wise it's coming on the back end at 16th in Georgetown. But we'll get to that. And the Pacers, obviously, something that we can't talk enough about right now, given the opportunity that is in front of them. However, there is going to be an 8-day break now between closing out the Cavs in 5 and awaiting the Knicks or Celtics, and common sense would tell you it would be the Knicks coming up next Wednesday and the latest installment of Hicks versus Knicks. But nothing new on that front's going to happen, at least for a couple of more days. Doesn't mean we're going to talk about it. Tony East, Locked On Pacers, and Forbes will join us coming up here in about 10 minutes or so. By the way, Little Al will be joining Jake Query coming up at 2 o'clock. And again, Jake should be back here 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock-ish. He'll actually be at the track. I am here in the drivehubler.com studios today. But anyway, there's at least enough of a window, not a window over Terre Haute, we'll save that for the track, but a window on the show to talk about the Colts schedule. Let's do that, shall we? And frankly, I may be more attached to that than most, not out of Colts fandom because it's my job. So, like, there's a couple of different schedule releases every year that I know I immediately have the Google Calendar pulled up because it kind of dictates what my life will look like over the course of the next 4 or 5 months. And maybe, just maybe, I'm just as fired up about the preseason schedule being announced, like knowing I get to cross an NFL stadium off my bucket list. I have been to Baltimore. I've never been to, I don't know if it's M&T Bank Stadium or if they call it something else from a corporate name at this point, but I've never done a game in Baltimore. I get to mark that off the calendar on August the 7th, one of the 2 road preseason broadcasts I get to be a part of. And frankly, I'm stoked about getting to do 3 games this year because Al Michaels has gotten into my pocket each of the last 2 years because the game's been on Prime, the 3rd preseason game. Not the case this time around. But I realize that my excitement for preseason football probably supersedes yours. So let's not have a full breakdown of the preseason schedule, shall we? Let's focus on what we see in terms of the regular season schedule. And again, this is unique about the fandom and the attention the National Football League gets. You know whom the team is going to play. The announcement of the schedule release is simply the order in which you play them. So the things that to some degree jump off the table to you about the Colts schedule are things you already knew. Like, this is the year that the rotation is that the Colts are going to play both teams from the West Coast. They play both the AFC West and the NFC West this year. So logic tells you you're at least going to have, likely 4 games that will be 4 o'clock kickoffs because you are playing in a place where they're either in the Mountain or the Pacific time zone. So, not surprisingly, games of the Los Angeles Rams, 4:05 start. Game of the Los Angeles Chargers, 4:05 start. Game of the Seattle Seahawks is a 4:25 start. There's some other 4 o'clock kickoffs in there as well that catch your attention. Not sure why Colts and Titans are at 4:25, but whatever. I'll show up to work and be there. The Denver game here is a 4:05 start, which is somewhat interesting, but all right, whatever. The fact that there are 1.5 primetime games for the Indianapolis Colts sounds about right. The half, of course, is the Sunday morning game because we knew that the Colts were playing in Berlin and we're going to give up a home game to play in Berlin. We knew their opponent, too. It'd be the Atlanta Falcons. That is a 9:30 a.m. kickoff, or in my world, I sign off the postgame show at about 3:30 that afternoon. But as somebody that, as I alluded to with Eddie earlier, is in the soccer business, I'm used to getting up at 7:30 in the morning for a sporting event. Now, broadcasting one, not necessarily, but again, I don't start till after the game anyway. It might be a tight turn for JMV that Sunday morning. Doing the takeover until midnight, and boom, 6:30 a.m. There might be some time on the Eddie Garrison Memorial cot that is here in the building. The Corman Lingenfelter sleeping suite. Whoever, the Joe Foxworthy condo somewhere here in the building. Somebody, knowing you got 6 hours to snooze, might as well stay here in the office. But that's 9:30 a.m. is not a primetime slot, but you're the sole game going. So I would consider that to be a primetime game for the Colts. And by the way, now of all the hosts I could be filling in for that would take the ball and run with this, I have seen this. I have not confirmed this, but I believe the November the 9th date is the 36th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that probably means nothing to Eddie because you're, 27, 28-ish?
26.
26, okay. So that happened 10 years before you were born. I was in the 8th grade, and I remember literally hearing that on the radio as I was on a bus going to school, that the divide between East Berlin and West Berlin was ending. And it signaled that the Cold War, at least as we knew it then, kind of started back up since that time, but at least as I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, but that's the anniversary date of it. I remember it was in early November, so it sounds about right.
It is the exact date.
So that is beyond cool that the NFL could time that out and that the Indianapolis Colts get to take part in that. So again, does that affect your one-loss record? No. It's just freaking cool that you're going to be there on the anniversary of the day that the Berlin Wall fell. The other thing is Monday Night Football. And we actually get to have it here, which is kind of nice. That doesn't happen very often. Maybe it was the Steelers 3 years ago, the last time that Monday Night Football was here. But for a team that is perpetually around 9-8, or seemingly has been, 2022, we would have killed for 9-8. Other years, that's been where this group has been in their 4-year absence from the playoffs. So in other words, if you get 2 primetime games, and I consider the European game a primetime game, 2 out of 17, that's about what you deserve. Other elements of the schedule that I like, you get the team that you know is still in a rebuild mode in your division. Those are the only 2 divisional games that you get to play until you are well late into the season. You don't see Houston and Jacksonville until Thanksgiving. And you play both of those teams twice in the last 6 weeks because of the Colts going to Berlin. You know, you get the bye week the week after. The bye week was so stinking late for this team last year. It's right, literally smack dab in the middle of the season. You play 10 games before, you play 7 games after. It's about as middle of the road as you can possibly get. So what is notable is the fact that you got to play so many West Coast games, but you knew that going in. But playing back-to-back weeks at home doesn't happen that often. And frankly, I think those games against the Dolphins and Broncos are pretty good litmus tests for this football team. So we'll know exactly kind of where they are because, let's face it, Colts and Broncos was kind of a play-in game last December. Didn't go well for the Horseshoes. Should have, but didn't. Miami was the only other team that was kind of hovering around that potential playoff spot. And so the first 2 weeks of the season, you kind of get to hang with the company in which you were keeping last year. Then you have at Tennessee, at the Rams, Raiders and Cardinals, both here. I mean, frankly, I kind of look at this schedule as being pretty user-friendly. Like perhaps the biggest kind of outside obstacle for this Colts schedule is the travel. Now, there's obviously a game in Kansas City that gets your attention right before Thanksgiving. But I think this is a schedule of opportunity for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, are they equipped enough to take advantage of it? We'll find out. Can they actually do something with it? And obviously the answer to that question is, we don't know. We'll find out maybe a little bit more in the preseason. We'll find out a lot more in the month of September. But other than the number of 4 o'clock games, other than the travel to Europe and then to see the Pacific Ocean on numerous times, the schedule doesn't strike me as being crazy hard for the Indianapolis Colts. So, frankly, right now the conversation should be about the Indiana Pacers. Right now the conversation should be about the upcoming Indianapolis 500. But in terms of that, I wanted to kind of get that out of the way off the top of the show. If you want to keep talking about it, 317-239-1070 for the limited time that I am here. Hit me up on Twitter. We can keep the conversation going at Greg Rakestraw. But then I'll give a quick look before we get to our first guest at the fact that, again, to show you how packed I expect the track to be today. We are 14 minutes into the session, and 20 of the 34 cars have already turned a lap at speed. Some of those cars will be kind of in race configuration. Some of those cars will be in qualifying configuration. So speeds may vary a little bit, but this will be an absolutely packed day at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Like literally, I've got the FS2 feed on in front of me, and like 10 cars are in a line going down the back straight as we speak. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening at the track. Jake Query will do most of this show from the track today, but they were kind enough as the substitute teacher to hand me a guest. So on the newly rechristened Rheingeist Hotline, I do not have a beverage in which to enjoy said hotline, but I do have a guest that clearly is impressed by the name of the hotline. It's Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Tony, we have never had an on-air conversation before, I don't think. How are you today?
No, but I'm glad we get to do it in the form of a christening. That's very exciting.
Cheers to you virtually.
Cheers, yes.
And cheers to the Indiana Pacers. When I have done other radio interviews this week, the constant theme has been, did you expect the Indiana Pacers to be playing in the Eastern Conference Finals? And, I will say no. And it's not to knock the Pacers. It's kind of how thought I good the Cavaliers were. If I had asked you a month ago, would this team still be in the present tense at this time of the playoffs, what would you have said?
Yeah, I would have said the same thing you just said, right? People thought, like a lot of people picked the Cavs in the most recent round, including me, and I think that people viewed that as no belief in the Pacers' ability. Clearly, they're very good. Clearly, they're better than their record. They've been playing awesome since January 1st, right? They're a very good team. It's just the Cavs are a 64-win team. I was reading about how few teams with the Cavs win total and net rating levels lose before the conference finals, like ever. It's very rare that happened, and I guess you could chalk it up to something about their health status, but I don't know if that truly is what happened. I think the Pacers just kicked their butt for 5 games. Outside of Game 3, they were the better team for much of the series, significantly so at times. So that's been why if you asked me a month ago, I would have said, no, the two top teams in the East are just phenomenal, right? It's going to be tough for them to take them down. Instead, they ran right through them, and now with Tatum being hurt, everybody's saying this could be present tense for a while. They're playing that well.
Let's face it. There's a lot of folks from a national standpoint that are really laying eyes on the Pacers for a first time this year, maybe a first time since, say, last year's Pacers-Knicks series or last year's Eastern Conference Finals, which obviously was very short and did not last long. The word that you continue to hear about this team is how physical they are. And I guess I am a child of my younger days breaking this business. I think of the near fistfights and half-court sets between Pacers-Knicks, Pacers-Pistons. That doesn't strike me as physical. So as you analyze this team, when did it first kind of hit you, hey, this team has a physicality that's tougher for others to match up with?
They're 2025 physical. That's the word people should use, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. You see it. There were times in the regular season, it's the regular season, but still that I would kind of complain, for lack of a better term, about they would just soft foul guys who had easy layups or, use their hands to defend when they got beat on the perimeter. You can't do that with the current speed and size of NBA players to defend. And Rick Carlisle's talked about it a lot, especially when it comes to his younger players. A lot of times with Jarris Walker's development or Ben Matherin's development, he has talked about them needing to be and match the physicality of the way the NBA is trending. And in the playoffs, they've been all about that. They've, hit guys when they need to. They're the right amount of physical off ball to get guys off their spots, and they use that to their advantage on offense. They press, which is, I think, why a lot of talk about the Pacers as a physical team, because they don't like going against a 60-foot defensive pressure for 48 minutes, but they're the team picking up the farthest from half court according to tracking data. They're just annoying to play against, and that leads to a lot of physicality and frustrated opponents, and that's how you get this term of physicality. And I thought it was funny, as Rick Carlisle spent a lot of the season talking about his team needing to rise to meet that level of physicality from, their opponents or from the way the league is trending, that he said before, I think it was game 2 of the series, he said, I'm actually smiling that we're being called a physical team, because that's not what they've been known for, but it's what they've become in this playoffs. And look at that. It has them destroying 2 pretty good teams.
Tony East on the Rheingeist Hotline. Greg Rakestraw in for Jake Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Of course, you can find Tony's work in the Locked On Pacers podcast and Forbes as well. Again, this is the hashtag, first world problems, good problems to have. Given how the Pacers are playing, they don't want an 8-day break. But it kind of is what it is. They're not playing until next Wednesday. Is there a player or two from a health standpoint that this break is going to be most beneficial towards?
Yeah, anybody who got banged up in that last round will be thrilled. Tyrese Halliburton with his wrapped left wrist in a couple of these last games. I think all the last 4 games of the series he had that wrapped up at some point. Yeah, Miles Turner had the ankle thing, and I think game 3 that he left, game 4, I can't remember. He was totally fine. He never missed a beat or even looked like he was, injured on the floor. But, those are the two guys that, like, obviously with time off, they'll feel better about whatever ailment or body part that they've been dealing with. And now we just get into the classic rest versus rust debate that will come with these, long gaps. And the other part of this is, like, people talk about this a lot. They hope the other series goes as long as possible so the other team is banged up and tired, and it's tougher for them to take the time to scout the Pacers ahead of game 1. So in theory, yes, 8 days off could lead to some rust, and that's challenging, but it also could be a thing that helps them in other ways that they'll have to figure out. The other guys I would look at as this gap being significant for is the older veterans, the guys over 30, or Pascal Siakams, who they were giving rest to him in the regular season. At the end of the year, you just never know what the wear and tear of 2 long runs in a row can do for someone his age. And same with TJ McConnell, 33, turned 33 like a month or 2 ago. You just getting some miles off of those guys and giving them time to kind of refresh ahead of another series, I think, is always good, even if they're not necessarily dealing with anything health-wise. So it can't hurt, but it does obviously lead to the rust conversation, and that's what they'll have to figure out this week is how hard do they want to go in practice to make sure they're ready to go come Wednesday.
Tony, I realize your expertise is the Pacers, and I'm going to ask you a Knicks Celtics question. But
okay.
but in any way, shape, form, or fashion, can the Celtics without Jason Tatum actually win 3 consecutive games and take that series?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it wasn't surprising to me at all what happened last night. Like, it's weird. That's the weirdest 3-1 Knicks lead I've ever seen because they were down
right.
14. They were down 14 plus in every game, like all 4 games, even the 3 they won. They were down significant, including 2 20-point comebacks. Like, that's great that they were able to do that. That does show some resolve, and like they will be a tough team to beat in any clutch game by the Celtics or Pacers or anybody the rest of the season. I don't want to belittle the Knicks coming back from 20 down, but that still means for like a long stretch of the game, the Celtics were much better. And sure, they lost Jason Tatum, who is their best player, but like, is Jason Tatum worth 20 points over 28 minutes of an NBA game? Yeah, I doubt it, right? So right. I certainly think it's possible that the Celtics are as good or better than the Knicks as constructed even without Jason Tatum, which is wild to say. So I certainly think they can win 3 in a row. I think game 6, obviously, in MSG will be the big one, but they showed it last night. Like, their 3rd or 4th best player, Porzingis, was just terrible. He couldn't move. He couldn't make a layup, and they still found a way to win comfortably, right? So I think they absolutely can do it, but they play such a kind of high variant style that you just never know. And the Knicks just have this plot armor to me, man. Brunson's on quite the run.
All right, so a Tatumless Celtics, the Knicks as they are constructed, which not just because of health, but because of flipping a roster, does look a lot different than the team the Pacers outed, 52-ish weeks ago. In their heart of hearts, Pacers fans should root for what team to win that other series?
That is a good question. I've been wondering that myself, who would be easier, air quotes, for them to beat. Right. No one's easy at this stage of the season. Like, I personally right now would view both of those teams as worse than the Cavs that the Pacers just beat, right? So, like, I think they'd feel fairly confident either way because of that, even though the Cavs were banged up. Without Tatum, I think the Cavs are a more formidable opponent than either of them. I would say stylistically, I think they'd rather play the Knicks. The Knicks just have less – this will sound like a bad thing, but it's not. It's just like a thing. They have less like defensive creativity in what they do and how they want to play, and I think that the Pacers, when they can kind of solve that stuff, would be better or more effective in that kind of setting. So I would pick New York as a little bit easier. They have less depth, too. That became certainly a factor in the series last year as the Pacers wore them down. Their top 5 is obviously amazing. They traded a bunch of assets to make their team what it is. I would slightly lean New York even without Tatum, but I totally understand also if there's a Pacers factor or a Pacers fan wanting to say, hey, I want revenge, after Boston beat them in 4 so easily last year.
I want to see this team make the NBA Finals. I don't care who's on the other side, frankly, to be blunt about it. All right, finally,
hey, look, Rick Carlisle said it. The door's open. It is totally possible.
Absolutely. Before we let you go again, Tony East, Locked On Pacers Forbes, joining us on the Rhine Guys hotline. Greg Rakestraw for Jake Query, briefly on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. The great thing is we are not already into off-season conversation for the Pacers. Yes. But since we have a bit of a gap, it is a team that doesn't have that many questions going into the offseason. But there is the one glaring one. So let me phrase it this way. Any idea what the open market is going to bear from a dollars standpoint for Miles Turner? What sort of contract is there going to need to be to make sure that a guy that is approaching top 5, top 6 status in terms of games played for the Pacers status that second, he gets a second decade here, at least the start of it.
Yeah.
What's that contract going to look like, Tony?
I keep saying, I have been saying, like mid to high 20 millions per year. But if you're really good in the playoffs and the regular season and you're a really good fit, it might be more than that. And hey, Jared Allen just signed a like 3 for 100-ish extension with the Cavs, and Miles Turner was just like pretty clearly better than him for an entire playoff series, right? So if you're Miles Turner's agency, you're like, hey, remember that Cleveland series? I think that's a pretty big deal. Like Brooke Lopez, I think, was on 2 for 48-ish for the Bucks right now, and he obviously has declined a lot since he signed that. But Miles was way better than him. Brooke Lopez got played off the floor in that series. We'll see what happens if Porzingis is even healthy enough for that to be a comparison. But if Turner keeps being better, mostly because of his impact and fit, but also just he's a really good player, then a lot of these top-tier centers who are in the 30s in this playoffs, like he's going to have a lot of negotiating power come free agency time. And I think the discussion won't be what do they pay, how do they do it. It'll be instead, can they go into the tax to keep this team, or do they have to shed someone else to pay Miles Turner what it's going to cost to keep him?
Yeah, fair enough. But again, we'll let that percolate for the offseason, which for the Pacers, fingers crossed, it's about a month from now, because I certainly think that we are now in dare to dream time for this franchise.
That's the other part of the Turner thing. Like if they win the finals, they just have to keep everybody, right? Like that's obviously like a pie in the sky to say right now, but if they're that good or they've reached this point and they think, dang, like we can beat anybody and we have the chance to keep this team together for however many more years, like screw the cap, screw all these conversations. Like that's the discussion, is just keep the team together.
Well, there is a certain word that's a 7-letter word before tax that I can't say on the radio. So I will change it to the success tax. That's the way that we can refer to it that way.
Absolutely.
Tony, where can people find your great work?
Yes, I posted on my feeds at Tony R. East on whatever social media you happen to use.
All right, sounds good, my friend. Tony, thanks for helping me christen the hotline, even though I'm the substitute teacher. Enjoy a little downtime, and look forward to following along during the Eastern Conference Finals.
Hey, you got it. Take care, Greg.
Thank you, buddy. Again, Tony East on the Ryan Guys Hotline. The countdown is on. Not just to practice laps in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but to Jake Query actually being on his own show. We'll have a hot change at some point in time during the course of this 12 o'clock hour. You're listening on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jake Query will make his triumphant return, not to this room, but to the fan studios, third floor of the media center next to the Pagoda at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I'm not sure if that's the official Hensley Legal Group Race Command Center or not, but how anticipated is Jake's return to the program? Literally, there is a video camera so I can see it. So like we were in a sports car race, we could make this exchange as quick as possible. So Jake could actually be on his own show. So apparently he's the Query and Eddie and I are the company part on the program today. Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Little Al Unser Jr. will be joining us. And Little Al is a name whose name has come up. My guess would be probably even on this show as well, because knowing of our 3 daily shows, everybody will talk some 500. Nobody is going to talk more 500 on our staff than Jake Query will because of A, how he's wired, B, what he does for the IndyCar Radio Network, his love and knowledge of all things Indianapolis and the state of Indiana. But in case you haven't kind of gotten wind as to what Alex Palou is going for, Alex has won 4 of the first 5 races in the IndyCar season so far. And that is the best start since Dan Weldon did that in the IndyCar series in 05. Sebastian Bourdais did that in the Champ Car days when the two were split back in 2006. We're to the point now where you're starting to think, hey, if Palou wins this race, and clearly he would be one of the favorites, if not the favorite going in. If Palou wins this race, now we're talking about some of the greatest IndyCar seasons of all time. And to kind of give you some of the numbers that maybe Alex would be shooting for, in 94, Little Al won the 500 and won 8 races that year. And again, he and Emerson Fittipaldi had gear that was so superior in 94, basically nobody else was on like the lead lap at the end of the race. That's how good I believe it was a Penske Mercedes back then. And obviously now you don't have that separation, which is what makes what Palou doing all the more impressive. But you're talking about like 64 A.J. Foyt, who won the 500, won 10 races. 69 Mario Andretti, his lone 500 win, won 9 races. Al Unser Sr. in 70 won the 500. I forget whether he won 9 or 10. I think it was 10. Michael Andretti in 91, I think he won 8 races, but did not win the 500. That was when Mears passed him very late in the race to win his 4th and final 500, and Little Al in 94. So if Palou has a chance to have the best IndyCar season since the split in the last 3 decades, it kind of tells you how special that would be. So my guess would be that'll be part of the conversation he and Jake will have coming up during the 2 o'clock hour of the program. Got this on Twitter from Luke, at Tony, at Greg. Listen to you guys talk Pacers, and I agree. I don't care who was on the other side in the Eastern Conference Finals. But we know damn well if it's Boston, Indiana beats them, the national media will be screaming, well, Boston wasn't healthy. They had no Tatum. Let him scream it, Luke. I don't care. And maybe it's being older. Maybe it's having done this for so much for a long time. Maybe it's not, frankly, being on the Pacers beat on a regular basis. And I'm honestly more of a true fan when it comes to watching the Pacers. I'm not like anything that Eddie or I do for a living is actual work, but I get to be more of a fan when it's the Pacers. I really don't talk about them other than the kind of situations where I'm filling in like this one. I don't feel like I'm having to study the broadcast. I get to just be a fan. But I was just at the start of my career the last time the Indiana Pacers made an NBA final. Literally, just barely. It was more than half I'm 48. That was 25 years ago. And I remember how awesome that was. And they were done in 6 and won 2 of the 3 games here. And frankly, we've had it better than most. I didn't have time to kind of compile this list. I'm going to give Eddie a homework assignment, whether it happens while I'm on the air, and it won't happen while I'm on the air because I got like 5 minutes or so left. But he can share that with Jake. And this is kind of a Hall of Very Good, not a Hall of Fame achievement. But again, in the last 30 years, the Pacers have made the NBA Finals 1 time. My guess would be of 30 NBA franchises, I would assume that half to 2/3 have made a final during that time. But if you actually looked at the amount of times the Pacers have made the Eastern Conference Finals during that time, I can probably kind of count them out right now. 94, 95, 98, 99, 2000. Made it again in 2004, and then 13 and 14. So that's 8. Then last year is 9, this year is 10. So you want to think about it this way, and again, check my math Eddie, to make sure I'm right on that, because we're getting past fingers and toes territory, so I could have easily gotten that wrong. But if I got it right, that's basically 1/3 of the last 30 years the Pacers have gotten to the conference finals. To me, that's pretty damn good. Like the only conference final stat that normally gets shared is a derogatory one, and it's in football. It's the Dallas Cowboys, who have not been back to a conference final since they made the Super Bowl the last time 30 years ago. But maybe I bring that up to tell you, hey, taking that step from the conference finals to the NBA finals clearly has been difficult for this team. And think about who was in the way. 94 was Pat Riley the Knicks. 95, it was Shaq and Penny before they got broken up and before Penny's knee went haywire. In 98, it was Michael Jordan. Then it was LeBron and Dwayne Wade. So again, that doesn't exist now. There is an opening. Again, in racing phraseology, there is a window over Terre Haute. Well, you know what? There is a window for the Indiana Pacers, and it is wide stinking open. And I want to take advantage of it. And I also want to tell you that Jake Queer will be back for the next segment of the show. He is literally standing by. The company part's over. It's all Query when we come back from the track at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. August 26th of 2024, I attended the Pearl Jam show. I was chauffeured to and from because he's got the real good parking by Jake Query. And it hit me today that I was kind of like Glenn Hansard, the opening act. I played a couple of songs. I maybe got to 3. My set list was about 20 minutes or so. But Pearl Jam, the main event, was expected to go for at least 2 hours, maybe 2 hours plus. So joining us now with 2 hours and 10 minutes of show left to go, the man whose name is on the marquee of this program, from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, ladies and gentlemen, Jake Query.
Well, Greg, thank you. And that is obviously, I'm not Pearl Jam, right? But if I was, that would make you Nirvana, Soundgarden, at least one of them right there.
Thank you.
Of the same ilk, right? No question about it. Thank you very much, Greg, and thanks for filling in, folks, on what is obviously a ton going on and a lot of fun, and absolutely thrilled that, every year I get the honor to MC the awards luncheon for the Union Construction Workers of Indiana awards presentation, and that involves a Q&A for a different driver or dignitary of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And in that capacity today, it was Dario Franchitti. So it was a pleasure to be able to do that, and obviously for Greg and the station to be able to facilitate, for Greg to be able to do the show before I slid over is very, very much appreciated, and it was a lot of fun. One of the things, by the way, before we get into, and I want to kind of carry on what Greg was talking about and some of the stuff that he went over with the Colts schedule, obviously the Pacers, and what's going on at the Speedway today. It's interesting that one little anecdote, and it's always interesting when you talk to athletes or you talk to people that are at the top of their profession, that you get little tidbits that surprise you. And I was getting ready to go out on the stage with Dario Franchitti. Here's a guy that's won 3 Indianapolis 500s, a guy that has a multi-champion within the IndyCar series and has kind of conquered this place, so to speak. And we're getting ready to go up there, and we're just kind of shooting the bull a little bit. And I said to him, I'm going to be honest with you, this is my number one fear in life is public speaking. And Franchitti looks at me and he's like, what? Like, you got to be kidding me. And I said, oh, man, radio's different because you don't see an audience. And then you get up here and you see all these people, and, it's tough. And he said, man, that's funny you mentioned that, because I had to undergo a public speaking class with George Harrison. And I said, George Harrison, like a guy from Fisher's, or George Harrison of the Beatles? And he said, no, George Harrison of the Beatles. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he said, I was 17 years old. I was racing in Scotland, and my driving mentor, who kind of discovered me and got me involved in karting and racing at different series in Scotland, is Jackie Stewart. And Jackie Stewart, the former Formula One world champion, who, of course, worked on the broadcast of the Indy 500 numerous times, says to Dario, look, you have massive skill as a driver, but you're way too shy. And Dario said, well, you don't talk to anybody in the car. And he said, you don't talk to anybody in the car, but in order to be a great race car driver, you have to be able to facilitate sponsors. You have to be able to talk with engineers. You have to be able to do interviews to be able to keep your sponsors appeased and keep the money going to continue to get the best equipment. And he said, so you need to go to a class to learn how to publicly speak. So he went to a class in Scotland, and he said he went to the very first one, and he goes through all these things, and then finally they said, okay, now it's time for you to give your big speech and do it in front of, basically like a Toastmasters type thing. And he goes out there, and it's Jackie Stewart and then all kinds of dignitaries from the country of Scotland, and the person that was there to judge and critique him was George Harrison of the Beatles. And so as he's telling me that, I thought to myself, maybe I shouldn't be as nervous about, and nothing against the union construction workers, of course, and the fabulous 600 people that were there today, but and all of them very deserving of the awards within their industry they were getting. But then I thought, I don't know if I'd be able to speak in front of George Harrison. But it just goes to show that no matter what line you are in, no matter what business you are in, no matter how acclimated and accomplished you are within what you do, there are people within even that industry at the top that at some point had something that was outside their comfort zone elsewhere. And in my case, it's emceeing events that's outside my comfort zone. And it was interesting to know that for Dario Franchitti, that was the case as well. We did talk, Dario and I did, about Tony Kanaan undergoing the refresher course this morning. Arnie just walked in, so he can probably tell me, although I know Greg would have informed you, but I was doing the event when it concluded. Tony Kanaan did pass refresher course, correct? Tony Kanaan did. That, as I've talked about, is going through under the eye of IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to go through different speed increments and then getting cleared should Tony Kanaan have to drive for Kyle Larson in the race. And I asked Dario Franchitti, obviously a contemporary and a close friend, former competitor of Kanaan's, whether that's something he would ever want to do. And Franchitti said, he did a great job, but in watching him, I'm glad it was him and not me because I would not want to go back out there at this age. I do some things in go-karting now that allow me to race as fast as I want to run, but not as fast as I need to run. And he said, and when you have to go to the point of needing to run, that's where things can get interesting. Speaking of interesting, yesterday I did find it interesting when the Colts schedule was released because of the fact that they did, and I'm going to be the old man yelling at clouds here, I realize. I would just like for one team in the NFL, just one. And I get it. I totally understand it. But I long for when we get back to, and I think we might actually get back to this eventually, where some team just puts up a slate and just says, here's our schedule. That's it. Here's our schedule. That's it. We open with the Bears. Then we got the Bucs in town. And then here's our schedule. Boom. I get it. Everybody, in the social media era, there is the importance of getting people there. And each franchise comes up with different and creative ways to announce their schedule. Now, sometimes it works, and they're really funny and they go viral, and sometimes it falls totally flat. I thought personally last year, and this is where I classically overthink things. This is where at 3:58 in the morning I lay awake staring at the ceiling, and then an epiphany hits me, and I wish that I wasn't as neurotic as I am. But with that brain dropping, last year, for example, the Tennessee Titans, they did their video by going out and asking predominantly young women, but people on Broadway Street, the logos of the other NFL teams the Titans were getting ready to play, and the women didn't know who any of them were. Like, they had the Seahawks logo, and they're like, the Falcons, that, who knows if it was real, if it was prompted, whatever. But from a PR standpoint, I watched that, and I thought, you could say this is funny, except for that, it is only showing that you have a large demographic within your own city that is unfamiliar with your team and its irrelevancy within the city. It doesn't even know the teams of the league that it plays in. And therefore, you are forecasting and showing that there's a large element of the culture of Nashville, Tennessee that has no clue about the Titans. And that's probably me overthinking it. But some of the teams try to get super cute, some do not. The Colts, I think, tried to get cute with the Minecraft thing, and then it was removed. And you guys may have talked about this, Eddie. Tell me if you did.
We did not touch on this.
Okay. The Colts had an interesting thing happen with their schedule release. And I'll tell you what it was that was interesting that's different than the headline you probably heard about with it. And we'll also go over that. We'll talk Pacers, and I'll get you up to speed, pardon the pun, on what's going on with oh-so-familiar names that are running up front at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway right now, including one who just jumped into the top 5 that said, fellas, don't forget about me either. And we won't, because I'll tell you about him next. Can't deny. You know, there's something about the Speedway that makes me think of classic rock. I think it's just the fact that I don't know what it is, but just coming out here, you know, you think so much of like the 70s and 80s to an extent, and I know that sounds, they probably wouldn't want me to say that, but there's a reality to it. Just like tailgating and hanging out and putting on some cutoffs, having a beer. I would
Just
love
one?
to come out here. Yeah, no kidding, right? Having a whatever it might be. By the way, Eddie Garrison, since you mentioned that, and we're going to get into the Colts schedule here, it's my understanding that the Surfside Ferry might have a delivery for you.
Oh, really?
A little bit of iced tea and vodka, a little bit of lemonade and vodka. I ask that you please, Eddie, drink responsibly, but you are 21. And they have, I'm telling you, between the fact that there are no bubbles within that and kind of guilt-free, just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar, those things are awesome. So, like if you were to come out here, just sit back with the Surfside, put on a little bit of, you know, whether it's Manford Man's Earth Band, whatever it might be, watch some cars going around. I love it. Absolutely love it. One of these days, and I've said this for years, one of these days, I'm going to take a personal day in May, and I'm just going to say, you know what, like Section 27, I'm just going to sit out there, have a tenderloin, let's go. Watch cars. Been a long time since I've been able to do that. I do love it out here, though. Special, special place. Right now, atop the speed charts, it is a guy that has won the last 2 Indy 500s. You heard Brendan telling you about it. Joseph Newgarden is the fastest on track today. He is followed in the top of the speed charts. They just, of course, took it away from me, but I believe Alex Palou is second. The late entry into the top 5, Scott Dixon, is now second. Ryan Hunter-Reay is the 5th fastest, and that is a guy for that Brian Reinbold team. He's been fast here. And last year, in a one-off effort for them, he was good. And Ryan Hunter-Reay knows his way around here. That's a guy that I think probably could have won 3 of these, but 2 of them got away from him beyond totally his own control. He had an incident on pit road once where Townsend Bell came in a little hot, and another time where his engine blew right in front of me in turn number 3 when he was the class of the field, I thought, in that particular race. All right, Colts schedule release. So, last night the Colts did, and I'll give them credit. I mean, their social media team, I totally understand it. You know, you're creative, you're coming up with stuff, and they did, and I'm not familiar with, I'm familiar with, but I don't do Minecraft. Now, Eddie, just out of curiosity, are you one who partakes in Minecraft?
Not a ton. I used to, but not anymore.
Okay, this is a game, basically an animated computer game, and if I'm not mistaken, you tell me, but I believe Microsoft is the originator of this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the Colts put out a video of their schedule release, and it was the schedule release as if it was Minecraft. And in this game, that means that the Colts are, you know, corralling and defeating each team along the way. The season begins, of course, with the Miami Dolphins. And they have a dolphin in the water, and it says Hill above it. Keep in mind, Tyreek Hill plays for the Miami Dolphins. A ship then comes in that is being manned by the Colts that says Coast Guard. And that's the extent of it. Now, the implication could be, you know, something of an allegation against Tyreek Hill or the insinuation that Tyreek Hill was a violator or something. I think that's probably taking it a bit far. But there are people that believe that the Colts took the video down because of the insensitivity towards Tyreek Hill and, you know, who's had some legal challenges, obviously, and the Coast Guard and et cetera. In reality, and I don't think that was it. I don't think it was the – matter of fact, I can't say this on record, although I'm about to, I guess. And I'm not speaking for the Colts, but I am absolutely certain that the Colts in no way, shape, or form meant or thought of it that way. They didn't. And I don't think it had anything to do with them quickly removing the video. And obviously, once a couple of the national publications catch wind of the fact that, you know, something like that takes place, they're going to run with it. And a couple did. Indianapolis Colts put out a Minecraft video and immediately remove it. But I think the bigger reason they removed it is this. The Los Angeles Chargers also did, and the Chargers are one team who have become pretty famous for these videos and having fun with it, and they do a good job with it. The Chargers also did a Minecraft video in order to show their schedule release and announce what their schedule is going to be. And in doing so, they, at the beginning of the video, gave and I'm going to use probably improper terminology here from a legal standpoint, but they essentially credited or recognized the fact that it was Minecraft, the intellectual property of Microsoft. And they inferred at the beginning of their video that the video that they were doing was being done in coordinates with the blessing of Microsoft. And so I think what happened was, I don't know, but I think what happened was the Colts, when they did their video, then saw that the Chargers did one, because I think, even though theoretically they were released at the same time, I think what happened was the Colts then realized, wait a minute, the Chargers have that disclaimer, and we did not actually get that cleared, or we didn't put that disclaimer on the front of ours. So instead of going back, and I'm sure they would have been able to obviously get the same blessing, but because the Chargers had already done it and because they realized they erred in not having that, I think that's why it went down. I think that's why it was removed. I don't know that, but that seems far more plausible and logical than the other way around in terms of the whole Tyreek Hill thing. I just don't think. And Tyreek Hill, if I'm not mistaken, also was like, yeah, it's funny. You know, I mean, they would have done the same thing if – I'm trying to think here. Eddie, help me out. I'm going off the top of my head, and I've slept 3 hours in a week. Is there any other ocean-dwelling creature that is in the NFL besides dolphins? There's no other, like, fish, right? Am I missing one?
I don't think so.
Like if it was the hockey, if it was the NHL, and it was the Kraken, which lives in the sea, they probably would have the same thing. Yeah, the Seahawks live above it, though, right?
Yeah.
Like the Seahawks they're flying above it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seahawks, by the way, are osprey. I don't know if you know that. Seahawks are osprey, and I believe a Seahawk itself is a fictionalized version of an osprey, even though Seahawk is, in my opinion, the best helmet side logo. I love the Seahawk logo. The original one. The original Seahawk logo I think is absolutely awesome. But that's in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. Now, as for the schedule itself, hard to know. We're in May. There are so many games and so many, I think in terms of the competitiveness of a team, you can look, for example, and say, oh, man, October 19th, they got to go play at the Chargers. That's going to be a big game. Do we know that? Is that going to be is that going to be a good week or bad week for Justin Herbert? You know what I mean? Like, how do we know? We have no idea. I think the bigger thing to look at is to just simply see the disbursement of the way the divisional games stack up, and then in addition to that, the way the road games stack up. And one of the things that is, I think, challenging is you end with 3 of 4 on the road, because you're going to need to finish strong. And you go to Jacksonville, you go to Seattle, then you come home against San Francisco, which is a total wild card, and then you're at Houston to finish things off. Now, the other thing, theoretically, you start 2 in a row at home and 2 winnable games, at least on paper from afar and this far out, Miami and Denver. But then you've got 2 of them on the road, Tennessee and the Rams. And again, 2 teams that, do they have any idea what's going on? Do we know at this point? Every year in the NFL, there is at least one team that comes out of nowhere. Literally, every year in the NFL, one team comes out of nowhere. And then there's always another team that is expected to, of course, be a great team, and it just never gets going for them. That's been the Chargers for like 9 straight years. The Chargers have absolutely been that team for a while. But we shall see. Eddie, anything that jumped out at you about it?
They have like a month stretch through the Colts where they don't play at home because they have so they play at home on October 26th. That's a Sunday, obviously, against the Tennessee Titans, and they go on the road to Pittsburgh. Then they have the game in Berlin against the Falcons. Then they have their bye week. They come out of the bye week on the 23rd and go to Kansas City, and then they return home on November 30th against the Houston Texans. And that is pretty much a stretch of 6 of 7 games where the Colts will not be playing at Lucas Oil Stadium. And the other takeaway I think that Greg highlighted in the opening segment of the show was the fact that if you look at, the last month plus of the Colts calendar on the schedule, it's not your typical Colts into season schedule. You don't have other teams that aren't within your division. You have a lot of division games at the back. You face Houston twice and Jacksonville twice in the final 6 weeks of the NFL schedule, which is not typical because most of the time we see the Colts often get front-loaded with their AFC South opponents. So I think that's something that sticks out. And opening the game against two teams that are going to be competing for the playoffs against Miami and Denver at home will give the Colts an opportunity to finally break that drought of that Week 1 loss streak.
So it'll be interesting to see for sure. The other thing, of course, obviously playing in Berlin. Now, Eddie, here's another question for you, okay? And this is a good one and I'm not asking this necessarily legitimately, okay? If you recall, so it's difficult for me to take time off in the summertime because of the racing schedule. So a lot of times when I take my 1 week vacation, I do it around the Colts schedule of what is a feasible time to be able to kind of get away in the middle of the Colts schedule, which is difficult because the Colts are obviously, a mainline story year-round in this town. The bye week is the obvious answer, but it comes right before Thanksgiving. So hypothetically speaking, a year ago, if you remember, when I took my vacation, I'm like, oh, I'll do it when they're getting ready to go to Minnesota. I'll take off the Minnesota game because what storyline is there going to be before the Colts are playing at Minnesota? I mean, Minnesota, Sam Darnold is starting for them. This is what I'm talking about when I say the schedule release, you can't, overthink things. Sam Darnold starting from Minnesota. The Colts are probably going to be, hovering around, maybe 500 or slightly, a game within it on either side. Minnesota's probably not going to be very good. What possibly could happen? It's an NFC game. There's no rivalry there. There's no division factor. That's a pretty nice. So we're sitting there, and I said, I think Minnesota's the game I could do. So what happens? But Sam Darnold takes fire. Minnesota's flirting around with a top 3 seed in the NFC the entire year. And the week before the Colts are getting ready to go up there, it's announced that Anthony Richardson's been benched. So you just never know, right? But having said that, Eddie, if you look at the Colts schedule right now, give me the game, in your opinion, that you look at, and it feels like it's the one that just has the least amount of oomph factor to it, where you're like, yeah, okay, not a huge one. I mean, they're all big. I get it. They're all big. But the one that just has the least storyline going in would appear to be what?
I've got 2. That would be October 12th against the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
And then a week prior to that when the Las Vegas Raiders come to Indianapolis.
Boy, that's a good one. The Raiders is a good one, yeah. I mean, because the Raiders are going to be terrible, right?
Well, Jake, you were just talking about teams that, could surprise people.
You're right.
I think that could be the team that surprises a lot of people. You get Pete Carroll in there to kind of get things back in the way of the direction of which Vegas wants to head. And Geno Smith is now the quarterback for the Raiders. They draft Ashton Genty. You have Brock Bowers. Don't sleep on Las Vegas now.
Okay. No sleeping on Vegas, is that right?
That's right.
I mean, who's going to sleep in Vegas anyway? All right, last night, NBA, Knicks in Boston. Interesting stuff going on here. And, I'm walking in today, and I run into B Swift. B Swift, our colleague, who, of course, works at, within our Radio 1 family, and then also serves as your MC at Pacer games. And he waved the green flag, I believe, to start practice today here at IMS. So I'm walking in, and I run into him, and we're talking. And I think he largely agreed with me in this fact, and that is I'm a little bit concerned is the wrong word, but while theoretically it is good news for the Pacers to have New York and Boston just beat each other up and work their way through, and let's go 7 games, and there's more time off for the Pacers, and what a break for them. The layoff worries me a little bit. It does. I know that sounds crazy. The layoff worries me a small bit because the Pacers are playing so well. They literally have been playing so well, and so they have been so dialed in that you almost want to just keep it going. Just keep, because now one good thing and one benefit now that we know the dates for the Eastern Conference Finals, I think the best case scenario may be Boston worries me a little bit. And the reason they worry me is because I think that we have the conventional wisdom that without Jason Tatum, they're done. But they got some players. And they have some players that without Jason Tatum can say, okay, now we've just got to kind of restructure the way offensively we're going about things, and we have the horses to do it. And Jaylen Brown is an elite-level talent. And, yeah, he does the whole dribble on the three-point circle between his legs 9 times while jumping up and down. He does that to excess probably, but a really good player and a versatile player. And Porzingis, when he's healthy, is a unicorn. He's almost impossible to contend with. And Derek White is a really good player. Pritchard's a really good player. Now, I know that their backs against the wall, and they got to go back to the Garden, which is no easy task, and win that game. But I almost would rather face, if I'm the Pacers, Boston than New York. I think New York has a grit about it that's tough. I think New York has, within that, something that is hard to put a complete lasso on, which is just like this toughness and nastiness of the way they play. And a lot of that's facilitated by Brunson, obviously. But if you look at the schedule itself for the Eastern Conference Finals, starting out game 1 on, now you tell me, as I'm reading this, folks, what jumps out at you. Game 1, May 21st, a Wednesday, at either Boston or New York. Game 2, May 23rd, a Friday, at either Boston or New York. Game 3, Sunday, race day, Indianapolis, May 25th. Let's go, right? Game 4, Tuesday, May 27th, at Indiana. Thursday, May 29th, back in Boston or New York. This is, of course, if necessary. Saturday, May 31st, in Boston or New York. In Indianapolis. And then Monday, June the 2nd, Game 7 at either Boston or New York. Now, the thing about that is what jumps out at you. The thing that jumps out at you every 2 days. And so if you're playing every 2 days, I think at that point, even I would rather face New York than Boston, because New York's rotation is shortened. And last year we certainly saw that the reality is that New York in that series with Indiana a year ago, and keep in mind, that wasn't even the conference finals. That was conference semifinals. And New York flat ran out of gas. Now, the Pacers, give them credit because they were really, really good. But New York ran out of gas. And that was a year ago, a round earlier than where they're going to play now. Now, OG Anunoby is healthy. That is a huge factor for them. Julius Randle is gone, and Karl Anthony Towns replaces him. But I think Anthony Towns is very susceptible towards giving up, baskets at the rim. He's a great player, but he gets worn down because he spends a lot of time on the ground. I think the Pacers are going to go right at him, and then if they can get Brunson in foul trouble or dinged up or wear him down at all, New York just doesn't have the depth. And I think advantage Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals based on the schedule alone. Yes, you would rather have home court advantage. I get that. You absolutely want home court advantage. But the schedule alone, I think, is advantage Pacers because of their depth, their ball movement, the rate of pass that they do, the fact they keep defenses guessing, all of that. New York is very susceptible in that. But you watched last night, I'm telling you. Eddie, you tell me if you agree or disagree. I don't think that it is. Boston probably goes back, and maybe in New York we see what happened with Cleveland, where you go back, you're on the road, and you're just and New York's like, we got a chance to finish it out here. And maybe if Boston gets midway through that third, they just kind of throw it in at that point. But I don't see it as the slam dunk. I think New York's got to win Game 6, or else it could get very interesting.
I agree with you.
Am I way overthinking it here?
I totally agree with you because even if you look at it from the Boston perspective, like they had this super team as it is with Tatum out there, a team with Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, Peyton Pritchard. That's still a really good team, and if you play them an 82 game schedule during the regular season, they're probably still winning 50 games. So like even though they don't have Tatum out there, they're still a really, really good team. And Tony East elaborated on this early in the program. Like Boston was down or was ahead by 20 points virtually in each and every game so far. And New York found ways to win games 1 and game 2, but they're still 20 points better with Tatum. So does that mean they're a team that they're pretty even now without Tatum? And it's still anyone can win it?
Way of saying it.
Yeah. So
by the way, Eddie, you go ahead.
I was going to say if New York, like we were talking about with Indiana, Jake, if they don't close it out at home in game 6, all the pressure now is on them to not blow a 3-1 series lead.
Eddie, do you happen to have the breaking news sounder by chance? This just in at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, new entrant into the top 3 in speeds for today, and it is Connor Daly from Noblesville, Indiana, and his car for Juncos Hollinger Racing, sponsored by AMPM. Connor Daly has now worked his way into the top 3, just turned a lap at over 224 miles an hour. He is out on the track in a very busy southern part of the racetrack right now, along with Alexander Rossi. Joseph Newgarden is still the fastest of the day, followed by Scott Dixon. Connor Daly is 3rd, Pata O'Ward 4th, and then Ryan Hunter-Ray is now 5th on the speed chart. Alex Palou, Colton Herta, David Malukas, Scott McLaughlin, and Alexander Rossi round out the top 10. Others of note, Marco Andretti right now is 22nd fastest. Ed Carpenter is 23rd. Marcus Ericsson is 25th on the speed charts. Elio Castroneves, by the way, turned the most laps of anybody yesterday, if you are wondering just how active and how busy one has to be. Even as a 4-time winner at this facility, you can never get enough practice. Castroneves right now is 15th on the speed charts here today. So a very active and busy day, and it is hot, and it's going to get only more humid. But the fans are out. Yesterday, I thought the crowd itself seemed a little bit down. It is absolutely picked up today, and then, of course, will be much more active tomorrow as we get ready for Fast Friday. So a lot going on here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Al Unser Jr., by the way, 2-time winner of this event, has a very cool thing going on and upcoming, and with an unlikely of partners, so to speak. He's going to join us 2 o'clock, 35 minutes from now here at IMS. Kevin Bowen making an appearance here, hanging out with Brennan King. Kevin Bowen and Brennan King are hanging out here on the third floor of the IMS Media Center, protecting the Kurt Darling Snack Bowl, which is I can't tell you enough. I mean, Kurt Darling, who you hear do updates and worked with us, of course, the radio station last year before going on to a new venture elsewhere outside of Indianapolis, although still a part of the team, obviously. He is the most proficient snack eater I've ever seen at IMS. It truly is remarkable. I like when during the race, when they bring out the big trucks and we say the sweepers are cleaning up the marbles in turn 3, they should bring Kurt Darling out. It's incredible. It's like a human vacuum cleaner. But nonetheless, the big bowl of snacks is there. Kevin Bowen hanging out as we are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Alonso Jr. going to join us about 30 minutes from now. Colts schedule release was yesterday. Pacers and Knicks. We just got done talking about that aspect of it. We haven't talked a lot about the track itself, to be honest with you. I mean, yesterday, the Pacers have been such a dominant storyline. And obviously, when you're on from the 12-3 standpoint, it is right smack dab in the middle of practice. So it is very cool because there is so much going on. And certainly, hopefully you can hear the sound of the cars in the background because it's such an awesome sound. But we haven't really gotten into and broken down just the race itself and what we have seen so far in the practice week. Truthfully, because some of that is because the practice week has been very fractured by Mother Nature coming in and throwing a monkey wrench in to get you caught up on what's been going on out here. And listen, folks, I totally understand and recognize that the primary interests of certainly right now the sports audience in this town is the storyline of the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals and having, as Greg said it best, man. I mean, I thought Greg said that perfectly. The window is like now. I mean, they have a beautiful opportunity right before them, and they may for a while now. When you look at the teams, is there really a team left that you feel like the Pacers wouldn't have somewhat of a shot against in a 7-game series? I mean, Oklahoma City is concerning because they have so much firepower. And Minnesota, it throws me a little bit because Anthony Edwards is just so competitive. There's something that jumps out about each team that gives you pause, but at the same time, maybe because it's right there beneath our nose, but you look at it and you go, yeah, but there's a lot about Indiana that would give people pause. I mean, everything from Neesmith's defense and rebounding to Nembhard hitting big shots to Halliburton elevating his game to Siakam on the low block to Toppin playing any number of 3 different things. I mean, there's a ton about that team that gives you reason and understanding to know that they absolutely have a shot. And so I understand that that's the big storyline. It goes without saying. But we haven't talked a lot about what's been going on out here because, as I mentioned, it's been fairly fractured to this point. Joining me now, he is the chief announcer of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Mark Janes is here, who is now on his 30th year on the IMS Radio Network, and this is year number, if I'm not mistaken, 9 for you inside of the anchor booth. Is that correct?
Be my 10th.
10th, okay.
Yeah.
I flunked math, so.
I understand. It was great seeing Kevin Bowen. I haven't seen him in a while, and you waved me over, and I said, "Is 3 hours in the afternoon not enough?" I mean,
that's right, because we have the call from 3 until 6 on the IMS Radio Network, IndyCar.com, of what's going on out here. And I was just saying, Mark, and so you're the perfect person to bring in for it. Haven't really gotten into in depth what's taken place out here. Truthfully, I don't know that some of the main storylines that are going to unearth themselves between now and race day probably haven't really taken a peek just yet because, you get Joseph Newgarden at the top of the speed chart. Scott McLaughlin looked really good yesterday. But then you wonder if there aren't some teams also that maybe aren't showing everything they have.
Well, I heard on the way in, I was listening to the practice session, and I thought Felix Rosenquist said something interesting. We have always been of the opinion that in this situation, Jake, that maybe if people wouldn't choose to maybe go out and do a qualifying sim or work much on the race setup because, there's no guarantee that conditions are going to be like this. It looks as though, from a forecast standpoint, it won't be like this Saturday and Sunday, and there's no guarantee it'll be like this on race day. However, Felix Rosenquist said something very interesting. He said, bottom line is this. If you can be fast now in these conditions when it's hot, he said, your car's in great shape.
Well, I would think, Mark, that a day like today, and for those that are not familiar with it, I mean, this track is very temperature sensitive, and when it gets hot, it gets slippery. And, there's a lot, the air gets thick, and that resists the car a little bit. So there's a lot of tricky things to it. So you could say to yourself, why bother going out in this? But the reality is, because if this is what it is on race day, you need to go back and pull your notes, right?
Better have that. And I think to what we talked about, wondering if they're working on a race setup or qualifying sim, it's very clear to me watching the monitor that Alex Palou and Scott Dixon are working on race day setup, because they're taking turns seeing what that draft is like. That now all familiar draft when you come off of turn number 4. And you can see Scott Dixon doing it as we speak as they get ready to cross the yard of bricks, and there he goes to the inside of Alex Palou. And my guess is, as he tucks right in front of him at the entrance to turn number 1, that by the time they get back around to turn 3, they will more than likely reverse roles on the racetrack.
Mark, do you think it's possible, because the teamwork is so important, right, of what you're talking about, at being able to have multiple cars, multiple teams to do things like this. The smaller teams, the smaller funded teams, or those that just have a car or two. Like, for example, our colleague through the course of the year, Davey Hamilton, who's now stepping aside for the month because he's going to be strategizing for Jack Harvey. Mm-hmm. Jack Harvey is teammates, of course, with Ryan Hunter-Reay, right?
Right.
And so do those two, if they say, look, we need a couple of other cars to kind of mix and play with to get some data, would they go to another smaller team like a Juncos Hollinger and say, hey, you guys willing to work for us for a couple of hours today, or are you pretty much totally on your own?
I think what we see here and at other racetracks on ovals like Milwaukee and Iowa, for instance, I think at Worldwide Technology Raceway, I think that's where the engine manufacturer alliance comes into play. I don't think there's any question that you'll find in the Chevy camp willing participants among other Chevy drivers, and the same is true of Honda. And I have even seen some, teams that and some drivers work together that had separate badges on their engines between Honda and Chevrolet. So, it's a process for sure, and they're working their way through it, and that's all part of it. But you bring up a really good point, and obviously the technical alliance comes into play for some of these teams like Myers-Shank and AJ Foyt. They have 3 cars between at Ganassi for Myers-Shank, and then 3 cars at Penske for AJ Foyt. So that gives them a total of 5 cars that they can go out and work in traffic with.
And the reality is those partnerships are there because Ganassi and Penske do find value in some of the engineering information they can get as well from Myers-Shank or Foyt, whatever it may be. So that certainly is all in play. Mark and I will be on the call for the radio network from 3 until 6. You're looking for what this afternoon, Mark, in terms of stories that might start to develop?
I think more of this. I think you're going to see a lot of cars running in traffic. I'm going to see a lot of people testing tire wear. I think you're going to maybe see some full loads. Maybe that last hour or so, depending on the traffic, we'll see some qualifying sims. And to be honest with you, Jake, I mean, it really wouldn't make any sense, I don't think, at this point with all the cars that are on track. It's a fan's delight. But it's probably not conducive to anybody getting 4 good laps in and not have it disrupted somewhat by the tow. What is that? That's about 11 cars right now that are running in a line headed toward turn number 1. So, yeah, they're really working on their race day setup right now from everything that I can see. Now, because of the fact there are 11 running together, I guess maybe one car could get a decent qualifying sim, but before you know it, like Alex Palou is doing now, you're going to catch the rear of that freight train. So
all of a sudden there's air all over the place. Right?
Tomorrow it's a totally different story, Jake. When they turn that boost up, give it more horsepower, that's when it'll be a full day working on qualifying sims. And then the same will be true of that early morning practice session on Saturday before we go qualify.
I know this much, Mark. We'll talk to you between now and then, obviously, probably on the show, but I do know this, and that is that, you know, you and I both have jobs we enjoy tremendously, and we have a lot of fun around the area. But coming up a week from Sunday, it is literally the most 3.5 hours of fun and privilege that anybody professionally could ask for. And I think that the fact that we all have that mutual respect of this place and the knowing the honor and the fortune we have to be able to call the race is literally the highlight of the year.
Well, that's very well said. And, I mean, let's face it. I mean, when you join the radio network, in my mind, it allows you to achieve a certain amount of professional immortality. I've been fortunate enough to be able to take that to the next level and be one of only a handful that have ever set that anchor's chair. And somebody else will have an opportunity to write their chapter within a few years probably. But until that time comes, I know that there is no group of people that I would rather do this with. And the amount of trust and respect and admiration that we have for one another is, I think, what makes it work. But as much as anything, I think that the fact that most of us, if not all of us, grew up being fans of this, never dreaming someday that we would be a part of it, but the fact that we are fans first and we understand the magnitude of what we do, having been a part of the audience for so many years, I think makes it pretty important for us to, as I say every year, Jake, in my open, I try to enhance the experience for those that are here and make those that aren't here feel as though they are. I mean, that's the goal that I think we all share on race day.
And when you throw it around to the turns, you know you trust 75% of what you're going to get, right?
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right.
At least that. That's a good number. That's a good number.
Right.
Yeah.
3
out of 10 will get you to Hall of Fame. So
3/4 of the guys you've got out in the turns, you've got total trust in what they're doing. One of them you're still trying to figure out.
Well, let's not talk about Nick Yeoman when he's not here to defend himself. So.
That's right. All right, Mark James joining us. We'll let you get up there and back into the booth, Mark. Appreciate it as always. We'll come back. Al Unser Jr. going to join us about 19 minutes from now here at IMS.
Thank you, Jake.
By the way, Al Unser Jr. is going to join live, which means that, and Mark Janes was here live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That means that we did not get an opportunity on this, the first day of our partnership fully with them, to use the Rheingeist Brewery guest line. And, Eddie, one of the things that I have discovered in the last, 24 or so hours, a little bit of 3:12 a.m. brain dropping that I had, hit me like a ton of bricks, was I was thinking about the fact that we now have this, and I'm thrilled for it, this partnership with Rheingeist Brewing, which, anybody who's been to Cincinnati, certainly you're familiar with Rheingeist. I mean, it's a major player within Cincinnati, and then now is the 16th largest, craft brewer in the United States of America. And, their Truth IPA is, that's the truth, if you want me to put it that way. And I'm thrilled to be able to, say their name and have them on board with this program each and every day. And I'm very grateful for that. And, certainly locally speaking, it is distributed by our friends at Zinc Distributing, who are good partners of the station as well, and major players here within Indianapolis in making sure that you can get your Rheingeist beers, whether it be at Crown Liquors or Big Red Liquors or any of the places around town that you go. And yesterday when I mentioned, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. You might have actually, folks, you may have thought you heard thunder at 3:12 in the morning. It was actually a brain dropping that was hitting me. When it hit me, the epiphany that here I am mentioning Zinc Brewing and Rheingeist, and then I realized that Eddie has one friend. One. His buddy Alec.
Yep.
And Alec is a distributor for Zinc. And I thought yesterday I laid it on a platter for Eddie to reference his buddy and his pride of his friend's work at Zinc and working with Rheingeist and indirectly being a part of the show and facilitating these things for us. And the fact that Eddie didn't make the immediate connection to shout out his buddy then gave me the 3:12 a.m. epiphany as to why it is that you have one friend and not two, Eddie. Right?
Is
that
this
right?
where you're getting at?
Yes.
Yesterday was the reason why I only have one friend.
Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, I'm literally, I'm serving it up right here. I'm serving it up for you. And yet you didn't give the shout out, right?
Did he text you with this said complaint? Is this why it hit you like a ton of bricks?
No, it hit me like a ton of bricks at 3:12 in the morning.
Okay.
3:12 a.m. By the way, before we get to Al Unser Jr. here, I want to bring on our Radio 1 colleague, B. Swift, who, of course, you see at Pacer games getting the crowd hyped and amped. It's interesting, first and foremost, and I'm going to shout you out on this or call you out on this. When I saw you this morning, I was on my way to go MC an event, and you and I have had this discussion. I find it fascinating. You obviously are the MC at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Yeah. You get the crowd hyped up. And one thing that you and I have in common is I'm terrified of it. I'm up there emceeing it and looking at the crowd, and I'm terrified of it, right?
But you know what? People never believe that when we say that, right?
Well, I think it's because when you, right now, and, here's the thing. The difference between when you're on the radio and I'm on the radio, I got 9 people listening, right?
Stop it.
Eddie's only bringing one of them, his buddy Alec, and then I've got 8, my mom and 8 of her friends. But you don't see the audience when you're on the radio.
Facts.
But nonetheless, you do an incredible job. And, look, you got the crowd hyped up and amped up for a lot of that Cleveland series. Then the team did the work from there.
Absolutely.
But you got to wave the green flag, correct?
Yes, I did. That was dope today.
How long were you up in the flag stand?
About 15, 20 minutes.
So you saw, they were at speed going underneath you throughout, correct?
Yes, Joseph Newgarden was out there at the time and a few others, and they were rolling.
Do you, in terms of the track itself, and I know that our radio stations do a lot of activities out here and work with the different fans that come out, but have you been have you been to the race? Is this a part of, I know you're obviously from the near west side of Indianapolis, so you're not far from the shadows of here, but just this place in general, overall experience for you, or waving the green flag is pretty cool.
Waving the green flag was cool. Last year, I got to do a 2-seater with Connor Daly.
Yep.
So this is, thanks to Jimmy McMillan, this has become something that I've kind of been brought into for the last 4 or 5 years, and I enjoy it. I'm here every year at 4 o'clock in the morning for the gates and for the cannons, and I enjoy really watching the race. Well, and I didn't come from a huge racing background.
Right. I think one of the things that's important, and I hope when I say this, you understand that I'm saying it with the utmost of importance and respect to
Absolutely.
it. I think one of the things that racing in general, and in particular this facility, is really trying to show to people is that this is a diverse. I mean, you look at the grid.
Yep.
You got drivers from all over the world that are here, right?
Yep.
And I think that there is a stereotype by a lot of people that this is, frankly, if I'm going to put it this way, small town white bread America sport. And yet it has been my experience, and I hope it's been yours as well, that it is a sport that welcomes everybody. I mean, we want everybody to come out here and enjoy it, and that includes regardless of background and culture. Right. And so, I think there is an importance of kind of breaking down, if you will, that stereotype. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense because that was one reason I kind of got in with the partnership, as Jimmy is legal and the DEI guy.
Right.
And that was the whole goal, was to bring more of us out here to see that this is for everybody. Because I used to live in Copper Tree, which is right up the street as a kid, and I knew race car drivers but didn't know who they were, right? I never had a reason to come to the race, didn't think it was for me. Now being here these last 4 or 5 years, this is something that I invite my friends to, and now they come, and after their very first one, they're like, this is amazing, bro. How did we not come to this? And I think Doug, I think Jimmy, I think their entire staff has done a great job at inviting and making us feel welcome.
And when you're in the two-seater, all you can think to yourself is, I can't imagine going 30 miles an hour faster with 32 cars around me.
Man,
legit.
I was terrified, but it was amazing.
Me both, trust me. I've done it a couple times, and it's like you get out and you're like, I don't know what just happened, but I will never again say they take the long, slow crawl down pit road, because when they're doing 60, it feels like you're doing 160.
Absolutely.
Right? All right, man, I appreciate you coming by.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
it out here today, all right?
Yes, sir.
We'll come back. Al Unser Jr. going to join us on the other side.
They are side by side. Al Jr. down on the low side. He's got the position. He gets by Scott Goodyear. It may not be enough, but at least Al Jr. now holds second position in this race. Scott Goodyear tucked right in behind Al Unser Jr. He's waiting. He's waiting about a car length and a half behind Al Jr. Al Jr. now lengthens it out. He's trying to hold him off. Goodyear low. Jr. high. They go to 4, Bob Blaney. Al Unser Jr. has the lead. One more turn to go. Here they come. Coming to the finish line. Bob Jenkins. Who's going to win it? The checkered flag is out. Goodyear makes a move. Little Al wins by just a few tenths of a second. Perhaps the closest finish in the history of the Indianapolis 500. Al Unser Jr. has become the first second-generation driver to win an Indianapolis 500. The checkered flag waves, and Al Unser Jr. has won the 78th running of the Indianapolis 500. Al Unser Jr. becomes a two-time winner of the Speed Classic on Memorial Day weekend in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And that second win for Al Unser Jr. happened to be on the birthday of his father in what I think might be the most famous, certainly one of them, race cars ever to run here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It is always an honor to bring on Al Unser Jr., who has been so gracious with his time with a number of occasions on this program, as a matter of fact. But what is a trip to Indianapolis Motor Speedway without running into Little Al? Once again, great to see you, man.
Thanks for having us on.
Let's begin with this. I want to ask you about a couple of different things here. But one of them that I think is really cool is this. Several years ago, and I've probably told you this story, but I used to work at a cigar store like a million years ago.
Okay.
And I'm working at the cigar store in Broadway one night, and I'm locking up the door, and I look down, and it's like a random October night. And I see this guy walking towards me, 10 o'clock at night, in a cowboy hat. And then I thought, that looks like Willie T. Ribbs. and I say out loud, well, that's Willie T. Ribbs. And Willie T. Ribbs stops and says to me, we've never met, and he says, hey, do you know how I can get a cab to the airport? And I said, well, I can give you a ride to the airport. So I gave Willie T. Ribbs a ride to the airport. I'm thrilled because I grew up in Indy, and here's the first, a historical guy, right?
Right.
And we exchanged numbers pre-cell phone days, and Willie T. Ribbs, since that day, Al Unser Jr., has treated me as if I grew up with him. Right?
Nice.
He is literally like the definition of friendship loyalty. And I don't know that I knew of the as Kyle Larson, by the way, just had the first incident. You can tell the eye of Al Unser Jr.
Is that a replay from the test?
That might be a replay, actually, from that is. You're right.
Okay.
That gets us every time, by the way. That gets us every time.
There he is. He always good.
He's always good for Kyle Larson, right? Although he got out, so it looked like always good. But anyway, so you have had a really special and long-standing friendship with Willie T. Ribbs that I don't know that a lot of people really fully grasped. You guys are about to put that all together, and I want to talk about that. But take me through how it is that you became friends with Willie T. and how your friendship is special to you today.
Well, our first race together was 1982, and it was at the Long Beach Grand Prix. We were driving Formula Atlantic cars is what we were doing. And so Willie was in that race. And then we later on hooked up, I think it was 83 that we drove for Dan Gurney in Toyotas at the 24 Hours of Daytona, and he was one of the teammates. I mean, it was a big team. There was 4 or 5 cars that we were running for Dan, and Willie was on that team. And simply put, we just remained friends from the first time we actually met each other, and we just stayed friends, kind of the same way it was with you.
Right.
What
I mean,
you
you
just
meet the
described.
guy and instantly you feel like you've grown up with him, right?
He's a great guy. Yeah,
now, what's interesting to me about it is I think to IndyCar fans, they would look at Al Unser Jr. and Willie T. Ribbs. And because of the fact that Willie, by the time he got here and qualified in 91, a little late in the game in terms of his career, he was not with a great funded team.
Correct.
And then he returns in 93 and makes another run at it. But that was at a time when you were at the zenith of the game, right? And so I think a lot of people would be surprised that you guys even crossed paths. How much, I guess, did he maybe lean on you, or maybe even for you, how much did you further appreciate the opportunities you had by seeing some of the struggles that he had?
Yeah, well, Willie always came to the motorhome after practice or whatever, and would ask me questions about what's going on out there and for practice, and of course I did everything I could to try to help him, and I hoped we helped him get in the show and that sort of thing. And he's just a great person, and I'm proud to call him my friend.
And I think a lot of people, at least out here, I think people know this now because, Uppity, which was a documentary made about him, which was fabulous, right?
Yep.
The guy was a hell of a race car driver.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people maybe don't lose sight of that because it wasn't an IndyCar per se.
Heck of a Trans Am driver is what he was. And he drove those cars like there was no tomorrow. It was really good. And then, Willie, he's a showman without a doubt. And so with this thing that we got coming up, this Pit Lane Unfiltered, it's going to be fun working with him. And we've kind of put this deal together the last couple of years. We've talked about this, and so the opportunity has finally come for us to do this, and the stories that we've got to tell are just immense.
So this gets underway, if I'm not mistaken. You're going to have kind of a kickoff to this on May 20th here at the museum, correct?
May 20th at the museum.
And they're going to follow you guys around. Take me through this Pit Lane Unfiltered with Al Unser Jr. and Willie T. Ribbs. They're going to kind of follow you guys around and just kind of tell the story behind the story, right?
Correct. What we're going to be interviewing some drivers. We're going to be interviewing some owners, and just telling the stories that we grew up with the Indy 500 and that sort of thing. And so, we're gonna do what we can to just tell the story unfiltered. Okay,
right.
and that's what Willie T. Ribbs is, unfiltered.
He is, man.
Okay, I mean
No
he
question.
is, and so I'm there to try to keep Willie on track.
Here's the thing. I'm
going to say try.
Right.
Try.
No,
I'm going to try.
Willie T. Ribbs was just inducted into a Hall of Fame recently.
Trans Am.
And he turned the acceptance speech into a story about his colonoscopy. So you've got your work cut out for you, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that's classic Willie T. Ribbs, right?
When the two of us get together, and we've done some interviews together, and there are no holes barred. I mean, Willie will take it some direction, and the one word he calls me that he says I say a lot is easy, Willie.
That's right.
So,
slow it down.
So we'll see. I mean, like I said, we've been talking about it for several years, and the opportunity has finally come to where we're going to do this, and we're going to have fun with it. We're going to just totally. It's not going to be a scripted thing. There's going to be some script to it, okay?
You guys can't have a script.
But
you can't have a script,
but
right?
it is going to be unscripted and unfiltered.
Okay, so Al Unser Jr., my guest here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This morning I learned something that I found interesting, and I don't know. There would be very, very few things about this place that I could throw in that you don't know. Okay, but this may be one of them.
Okay.
When Dario Franchitti won his first Indy 500 in 2007, he gets out of the car, and Kevin Lee, who was my colleague on the radio network at the time, was interviewing him. And the first thing Dario said was, "I understand now." And so I asked him, I said, "I've always heard that quote, and I've always wanted to know, tell me exactly what it is that you finally understood." And he said, "When I got out of the car, I realized that forever I heard the clip of Al Unser Jr. saying, 'You just don't know what Indy means.'" Mm-hmm. And he said, "I always kind of snickered at that because I'm a race car driver and it's a race." And he said, "But then I won it. And the first thing I heard when I got out of the car was Al Unser Jr. saying, 'You just don't know what Indy means.' And he said, and the first thing I thought was, I understand now."
Right.
And he got it.
Right.
Do you still, Al Unser Jr., when you walk through these gates and you come into this place, even on days when there's nobody here, do you still understand? Do you still know what it means?
Absolutely, we understand. And I had a friend of mine ask me that just this morning. Okay, and his name's Scooter, and he asked me. He goes, "When you go under that tunnel, do you get teary-eyed?" And the answer to that question is, I used to. Before I won the race, I used to, and it was not coming through the gates, but after qualifying, when I'd qualify for the 500 prior to winning it in '92, when qualifying was over and I'm going down the backstretch, I would just, all of a sudden, I'd get really emotional. And I think a lot of that was the stress from qualifying. You're trying to get it in the show, and then it's a 4-lap run, which is a long run, and that kind of thing. And then when I won it in '92, and I came back in '93 and qualified, I was expecting the emotional tears to happen to me after qualifying, and it really surprised me because it didn't happen. And that was the first time since I was a rookie, because I cried every year, and until I won it. And he looked at me, Scooter, goes, well, you slayed the dragon, is what he said.
Is there an element of that, though?
There could be, I don't know, but this place is emotional no matter when you come. The love for this place is immense, and the biggest challenge that we had as drivers and team is keeping our head on straight, okay? Not letting the little details, the little intricacies of the day not take us down a rabbit hole that we couldn't get out of. And that is so hard because this place means so much.
Well, did you ever find, there was such a foregone conclusion in the career of Unser Jr. that you would win Indy because of your uncle and your father, right? And you have so many near misses. I mean, 89 obviously is the first one that comes to mind, but was there ever a time where you thought to yourself, it's just not in the cards for me?
Yeah, after 89, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're that close, right?
Because we did everything right. The team, perfect strategy. I drove a perfect race. I mean, we were so well prepared for that race, and then, it was a God thing that we came up short. We did everything right. And so I just went, wow, what happened to me after 89 was Monday morning I woke up and I went, I was relaxed. I was calm. I just said to myself, no matter what, the fans knew who won that race yesterday. I didn't drink the milk. I didn't get the money. I didn't get the trophy and we didn't go to victory lane. But, and that just put a calmness on me and a relaxation. When I came back in 90, it was totally different. We just need to go out and just execute now, okay, and just hope that that it comes to us, and then 90, 91, happens, and we don't have the car. We were making mistakes as a team, and that sort of thing, and I got to thinking, well, just call me Lloyd Ruby is what I said to my first wife. You just call me Lloyd Ruby,
guy, right?
who had several opportunities to win and then didn't, and I started to believe that, and as a matter of fact, even race day morning of 92, I wake up, I was praying for a hot day. I go out, it's the coldest day in the history of the 500.
Yeah, that's right.
I've qualified
crashes
12.
Can't get in a rhythm, right?
I mean, everything. And I just went, we're just going to go and get points today because I didn't have the car that was fast enough to go and run with the Lolas.
Right.
Okay.
And Michael Andretti did.
He did, and he was gone, and so, that I was convinced that I was not going to win that race.
I mean, what do they always say about the Speedway? And I know it's a cliche. This is a track that chooses her winner, right?
That's right.
And in 89, you go into turn 3, and she chose Emerson Fittipaldi. Yep. And then 3 years later, it's your turn, right?
I was proven that point, because I grew up watching Dad and Uncle Bobby run the 500. The 500 has been my life,
right?
Since I started racing go-karts, right? And in 1985, when I watched Danny Sullivan spin and then come back and win, I knew right then it was God comes down and decides who the winner is, not anything else.
Right.
Because back in that day, you spin, you're going to hit the fence. There's no two ways about it. You spin out, you're going to hit the fence, and Danny didn't.
You know what's funny, Al? Danny Sullivan, who obviously you know really well.
Yep.
I would bet you that Danny Sullivan has probably not gone 3 days of his life without somebody asking him about the spin to win, right?
Right.
And I'm guessing that deep down he probably still is like, yeah, I don't really know exactly what happened there either. You know what I mean? Like he'll admit that it turned and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm in the right direction. And he went through the gearbox and gets it back in gear and boom, let's go, right?
It just happened and he was going the right direction. Yeah.
So Unser Jr., our guest, there's a lot to get to with you, and I know you guys got a busy schedule here, but I wanted to ask you about this as well. I'll tell you something funny. For the Grand Prix race over the weekend, my position for that, to call it on radio, is atop the Turn 2 suites, okay?
Okay.
And that was the initial broadcast position of your uncle, Bobby Unser, when he did television.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve Shunk, who I'm assuming that you know, but Steve Shunk, who's a mutual friend of ours, was telling me that the first year that Bobby Unser was doing the Turn 2 suites, Steve's working for ABC, and they come to him and they said, now listen, so Bobby Unser is going to be on top of the Turn 2 suites doing we 4 people can be up there. No more than 4 people. Fine.
Right.
So Shunk is down on pit road race morning, and they come to him in a panic, and they said, my gosh, what in the heck is going on? Bobby Unser's got a catering crew up there. And he managed to talk like 18 people from Jugs Catering.
Sure.
So they're having a party on top of the Turn 2 suites, right? I mean, such a personality.
Mm-hmm.
And then your dad, more of an understated guy, just an all
Dad
business
was quiet.
guy. Right,
Dad
quiet
was quiet.
guy.
Yep.
But in all honesty, with how much this place means to you, is it hard for you to come here without those guys here?
Family, yes. It's hard to come to Indy because, I loved my Uncle Bobby. I loved my father. I miss him more out in everyday life. We miss them, and because they're family. And so yeah, we miss them a lot. As far as here at Indy, they were legends. They were super successful, and I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to join them in Victory Circle and that sort of thing. And so, but yeah, we miss them all the time.
Growing up with those guys, and I know that the dynamic between your dad and your uncle, there's racing, there's competitiveness, there's sponsor competition.
Super
all of that,
competitive.
Right?
Those two brothers.
I can't remember which one it was that told the story that one of them got a set of tires delivered to their house in Albuquerque that was supposed to go to the other, so they didn't tell the other, and then they went ahead and put the tires on the car, and then that leads
that
to
is correct.
All kinds of stuff like that, right?
And it was when Dad would get anything in the mail, okay, of anything. Parts, anything, okay? And he wasn't home because he lived right across the street from Uncle Bobby, West Central. And whenever he wasn't home and he received packages, they would just take it over to Uncle Bobby thinking they're going to,
Right.
And
it seems safe, right?
It seems safe, and drop them off, and Uncle Bobby, sure, yeah, we'll give it to him. And he'd go and stash it, hide it, and never give it up.
Right.
And so Dad would have to go over when he'd get back in town and would get back. He'd have to go over and search Uncle Bobby's, because this was supposed to show up. And it hasn't, and it's been 3 or 4 days, so it's got to be over at my brother's.
And so, therefore, I would imagine, they're I don't know if their relationship was icy at times, but it's touch and go, right? Because you're competitors.
Oh, yeah, they're brothers.
So having said all of that, when you were a young buck coming up, which of the two of them, did they counsel you and teach you actively, or was it more, look, you've got to learn some of this on your own and a little more hands-off, and we're here if you need us? What was the dynamic in terms of you learning as a driver from the two of them?
Well, the dynamic was just simple. Dad taught me how to race from the time I was 9 years old to all the way up through sprint cars, through everything, until I got to Indy cars. Okay, and so he taught me everything. If he saw something that I was doing, he'd come up and go, Al, I've noticed this. You need to do it this way is a better way, and so on. And up until I started racing against him. And the second I started racing it against him, that ended. But if I then had to ask the question. If I asked the question to my dad, I've noticed this. why are you doing this or what have you at one of the racetracks, or he would tell me the truth. He'd be honest with me. But I had to ask the question.
Right.
He quit volunteering information, once I started
Now,
racing
what about
him.
Bobby?
Uncle Bobby was always full of advice no matter what. And no matter
Even
when,
if you didn't ask for it, probably, right?
When, absolutely.
Yeah.
It could be on the snowmobile. It could be anywhere. Uncle Bobby, that was just his personality, I mean, when, and so it was great. I just took, basically 80% of what Uncle Bobby says, you got to just throw it out the window because
Right.
he's listening to himself talk, okay, because he loved that. And 20% was good. Okay, and so Dad, because he didn't talk a lot, it was just the opposite, So
I just told the story on the other day. I probably have told you this. I was in my early to mid-20s, huge race fan. I don't remember who I was talking to, and they said, "Yeah, Bobby Unser's got a listed phone number in the phone book because he likes talking to race fans." And I thought, there's no way this is true.
Yeah.
So I called information in Albuquerque, and I asked for Bobby Unser. They said, "Oh yeah, here's his number." So I call him. Now I'm a little embarrassed of this now, but so I call him. And he answers the phone.
Right.
And I said, "Hi, Bobby. My name is Jake Query, and I'm from Indianapolis, and I went to the race in 1981. It was the first race I ever went to, and I had a question for you." Well, I just love talking to race fans. And I think I asked one question, and I was on the phone for an hour and a half.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's
Uncle Bobby.
It was the greatest, right? Literally. He just went on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that stuff that we're talking about was in a museum, basically the Unser Racing Museum in Albuquerque. That is no longer in Albuquerque, correct?
Right, that is correct. When my dad passed away, his wife decided that she didn't want to do that anymore, and so we found a museum in Lincoln, Nebraska called the Museum of American Speed. The Smith family, they also own Speedway Motors, and they now have gotten the Unser collection, is what they're calling it, and they've got it in their museum. And we just had a grand opening just a couple weeks ago at Lincoln, and it's just the collection, the memorabilia, the artwork, the trophies, the cars from Uncle Bobby, Dad, and myself are just enormous.
And does that include some of the Pikes Peak stuff and all
absolutely.
of it? Yeah.
Even
tell that story without
even
that, right?
Uncle Bobby's hunting dune buggy is there, okay? And so, it was Norma went with us when we did the grand opening, and on our way back, she looked at me and she goes, "I'm just overwhelmed with how much you actually did in your life, because it's all out there, and
I'm sure it's probably surreal to look at some of it, right?
It is. There's a bunch of accomplishments of awards, trophies, and that sort of thing, and Norma was just going, I never thought it was that much. Kind of thing.
It's interesting to wrap it all up here. So May 20th, by the way, Pit Lane Unfiltered. May 20th is when
May
everything
20th.
gets underway
Yep.
with you and Willie T. Ribs. And then people will be able to see and enjoy all of this and the completed product of it where and how.
Yeah, that's in the process.
Okay.
We've got to what we're doing is we're doing a lot of filming once we get back here, and the 21st, 22nd. We're going to start putting a lot of it, as Willie says, in the can, okay? And it's our first show is going to be unfiltered at the 500.
And Willie T. Ribs, his son now, by the way, is a nationally,
Theo
Theo's
Ribs is a world champion ski
rifle
shooter.
marksman, right? Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah,
and represents Team USA and the whole deal.
Oh yeah.
And Al,
great.
As you guys do this, and I know that you've been to Pacer games, right?
Yep. I enjoy the Pacers.
I know. Yep. I saw you on the video board, and they won that game. So we need to get you to the Eastern Conference Finals because you're good luck, right? We know that.
There
much.
you go.
But here's
Love
the
it.
thing. I'll leave you with this. It's disingenuous to say that you and I know each other well, but we obviously have crossed paths, annually at the very least, right? And have for many, many years.
Yep.
In me covering this sport. You mentioned that it's your job to kind of keep Willie T on task, right?
That's
like,
right.
Easy, Willie. Your wife, Norma,
I don't know how hard that's going to be extremely hard
to
do.
It's, well,
okay?
it's impossible. It's an impossible task.
I just hope it's possible.
It's like calling Uncle Bobby and expecting to get one question in 15 minutes, right? But your wife, Norma, I can see it from afar, it's just the perfect teammate partnership, right? Absolutely. I'm not saying that she's easy little Al, but I can tell that, I can see the radiance of the glow of the fact that you are a happy guy. And it's great to see.
She's a huge part of that, and so we love her to death, and she runs 200 miles an hour all day long, and so which is great.
That's good. I like it.
Keeps me busy.
That's right. Well, hey, listen, I know that in that busy schedule you made time for us. It's always a pleasure. Certainly appreciate it. We look forward to everything. Getting underway May 20th, right?
You got it.
May 20th. All right. Al Unser Jr. joining me here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We'll come back, get you caught up on what's happened in terms of the speed charts, and get back into not only Pacers Eastern Conference Finals Colts schedule as well. We return here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the Fan. Back at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, thank you to Al Unser Jr. for his time. Always enjoy talking to Little Al. And I was serious when I said that. Little Al is a guy, I say little, sounds kind of crazy, right? But Al Unser Jr. is somebody that, has had his challenges. And, he is the first, and I've always appreciated his candor in talking about that and trying to overcome them. And I think one of the things that we can learn in any walk of life, but when you look at somebody like Al Unser Jr. that has had challenges, had struggles, he's been open about it, alcoholism and legal troubles that stemmed from that. And, it's never too late. It's never too late to find your zone. And I don't know him, like I said. It's not like Al Unser Jr. and I are the best of friends, but I certainly, know him or am in, and I can see it. I can just see that he is in his zone, and that is clearly a very, very good thing to see. And then Willie T. Ribbs goes without saying, one of absolutely my favorite people. Pacers, of course, what we now know, talked about it earlier, is the Eastern Conference Finals. This is going to be slotted where there is a game basically every 2 days once they get underway. And when they do, the 21st, 23rd, and 25th, those are the dates of the first 3 games, for example. Then the 27th again. The only break of more than 2 days between games is that between Game 6 and Game 7. That is a 3-day period between Games 6 and 7 should it go to 7 games. And I think everybody, maybe even myself included, because we've talked about it ad nauseum. Yesterday we spoke about it as if it was a foregone conclusion that it was going to be the Knicks and Pacers and Racers in the month of May. And the reality is that the Knicks still need one more win, and that is a really tough win to get because the Boston Celtics are obviously legit. They are a team with a title. And yes, they have a guy in Jason Tatum that is undoubtedly one of the probably, what would you say, Eddie, top 10 players in the NBA currently when healthy, Jason Tatum?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Right there in that, certainly at the very least 6 to 10, 6 to 12 category. And, the devastating injury of Jason Tatum, which now may be out beyond, he may be out all of next season. I mean, I think that's a very safe assumption because he had a ruptured Achilles, and that is not an easy thing, to come back from. So having said all of that, I think that we overrated, overlooked, undersold the aspect of the depth of the Boston Celtics. Porzingis, who obviously his health is of question, but Porzingis is a dynamic unicorn-type talent. They have missed him for so many games that you almost wondered, like, I'm not going to say, what are they waiting on with him? But you see it when he's healthy because he is just almost unguardable when he's going, and especially with that outside shot. Jaylen Brown has a little bit of Travis Best in him. And what I mean by that is Jaylen Brown, when he has the ball on the wing, he can get into over-dribbling very deep into shot clocks to the point where you're probably chewing your nails if you are Boston. However, with that said, I have always loved the game of Jaylen Brown. And I think he is not only a diverse and versatile talent, but I think he also is an incredibly high basketball IQ player. I think he just has a very good feel for the game. At times does probably over-dominate the ball, but still a very good feel for the game with Jaylen Brown. Derek White is a very good player for them. So Boston, what I'm getting at is I don't think that it's necessarily the slam dunk. And there is part of me deep down, even without Tatum, that wonders if still you wouldn't want New York over Boston because of the fact that New York, as good as they are, and they're very, very good, and OG Anunoby is a difference maker for them from a year ago now that he's healthy because of his defensive ability, his rebounding ability. OG Anunoby changes them a lot. But Karl Anthony Towns is there as well, and I think Indiana, you're going to hear me say this every day until the Eastern Conference Finals begins, if in fact it's New York. Indiana is going to go right at Karl Anthony Towns. I really believe that. I think their game plan is going to be offensively in sets early to get the ball down right on Karl Anthony Towns and try to physical him, knock him around a little bit. He's a huge body, don't get me wrong, but go right at him and wear him down. And then at that point, I just think New York is vulnerable because of, and they are, I'm not underselling their talent at all, but their lack of depth when you are playing every 2 days. There is so little time off now that I think that they are very susceptible because of the fact that they do not, and you saw it a year ago. A year ago, it's exactly what happened in the fact that Indiana took New York to the limit, going back to New York in Game 7, and I think all of us thought, oh, here we go again. Game 7 in the Garden. I've seen this movie before. I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure, Ewing, rimmed out that shot, but I just, man. And you just felt like it was an automatic that the Pacers were going to struggle, and they went and absolutely manhandled New York. And I think a huge part of that is because of exactly what I just talked about. New York was out of gas in Indiana, and Indiana's deeper this year than they were last. And New York is kind of hanging on a thread there, and Tom Thibodeau loves to run that bad boy until the fuel lights ablaze and the dash is still to the left of the E. And that may be the case. Speaking of that, somebody had a question about fuel efficiency at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I will answer that and put a tie on everything that's happened out here today and hand it off to John next. You know, Brendan King is recording one of his track updates next to me, and I probably can just let you hear him do it, and then you'll know everything that's going on out here. But he might. Brendan, are you done with us? Oh, he's done with them. Darn it! He's just going to have you do one live right here, man. Go ahead and let everybody know what's going on. Which is the track just got back to green conditions. They had a track inspection and had things closed down for just a little bit. Things will be continuing until 6 p.m. tonight. The Colts, by the way, have issued a statement in regards to, we talked about it earlier, their schedule release. Now, if I wanted to be an old guy, I would say, look, this all could have been avoided by I'd love for some team to do it eventually. Just say, here's our schedule. That's it. Instead of doing the whole cute thing. But I get it. The NFL has done a masterful job of owning the sports calendar year long, and the schedule release is a big deal. People anticipate it, and then they want to see and social media teams are usually fun. The one that I think is the gold standard, or the one that kind of first broke through on how important a good social media team can be towards building your brand was UMBC, Maryland, Baltimore County, the year that they defeated Virginia in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And the social media account gained 60,000 followers over the course of that game just because they were funny and creating funny things. But the Colts, I talked about it earlier, they had their schedule release done in the form of kind of a knockoff, if you will, of the game Minecraft. And in doing it, the first thing that they showed was a Miami Dolphin, because that's their first game, and then a Coast Guard ship coming up, and the Dolphin it said Tyreek Hill. Of course, Tyreek Hill has been involved in legal issue. I believe one of those involves domestic violence. I could be wrong in that, but I believe that's correct.
Well, remember, he got arrested, Jake, last year on his way to a game.
Correct. And I believe when he was arrested on the way to the game, those charges were eventually dropped. I could be wrong in that.
Yes.
But it's just all of it comes down to gray area that probably was best to just avoid. I don't think that they meant anything overly malicious by it, but a little of that's on Tyreek Hill. Not a little, but a lot. I mean, look, the reality is this. You could say that the Colts needed to do a better job of being aware of those things, but then the other end is if Tyreek Hill doesn't have a cloud of things like that around him, and I don't mean the part about being, wrongly pulled over if that was the case, but rather, some of the other things that he's been involved in. But nonetheless, the Colts issued a following statement. We removed our schedule release video because it exceeded our rights with Microsoft and included an insensitive clip involving Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill. We sincerely apologize to Microsoft and Tyreek, end quote. Now that, again, as I had mentioned, the Chargers put out a similar video. And in the Chargers video, where they also did a Microsoft theme, they began their video with the disclaimer about the fact of their relationship and, just the – excuse me, I had to sneeze there – about the overall partnership with Microsoft and the fact that, it was trademarked or whatever and they had permission to do so. The Colts had not done that, and then it came down. And so, as I said earlier, I assumed that the reason it came down was because once they saw the Chargers release, realized, oh, gosh, we didn't get that same approval, if you will, or permission to do so. But that's where things stand. Obviously, the schedule itself is out. In that schedule, I think one of the things that comes to mind or jumped out to me is just the fact that there is no point in the year where they have any more than back-to-back road games, but they do finish on the road for 3 of their final 4 games. Okay. The other thing that somebody asked me earlier today when Mark James was on, we were talking about running a full tank or a full fuel tank, full rich on fuel for these cars. The cars themselves, the fuel tank here in an Indy car is 18.5 gallons. 18.5 gallons. Now, they run it's basically an E85 mixture fuel, but the fuel itself it runs at about 2 miles to the gallon, 2.5 miles to the gallon. Late in the race, they will tell drivers if they want to conserve fuel. Dario Franchitti had a situation late in the race where he had to conserve fuel. Alexander Rossi won the race by conserving fuel. They will give them a number. You'll hear them say they're giving the driver a number of 3, 3.5, 4. I remember Franchitti once in the radio, they told him that he had to hit to finish the race a fuel number of 4. And he got on the radio and said, "You are absolutely dreaming." And what they meant by that was you need to get 4 miles to the gallon, which basically you need to double your fuel efficiency. The way you do that is you tuck in behind another car. You get that car to kind of break the air for you. There are a number of ways that you can, as we call it, make fuel. Scott Dixon's the best at it. And that's what Franchitti has been able to do. That's what Rossi did in that year. So when they go out with a full tank of fuel, it slows the car down because the car becomes heavier, obviously. It goes without saying the car's heavier. And so one of the things that Mark was talking about that I think is very possibly what we're seeing today is the fact of cars going out and running with a full tank of fuel to find out, A, what their fuel efficiency is and how to, conserve fuel if need be, and then B, what their speed is when they are at maximum weight of that. A lot of times on a restart, you will hear what we call a short fuel. You'll hear someone say, hey, somebody came in and they short fueled it. That means they came in and instead of a full tank, they took, say, a half a tank or a three-quarter tank because they have done the math and figured out they don't need, based on when they stopped, a full tank of fuel. Because if you're running it at 2 miles to the gallon at 18.5 gallons, for example, that you're going to be able to go, what is that, 37 miles or, whatever it may be before you come back in. Now and obviously you get 2.5. That is the same. So we will see speeds tomorrow that will be more representative of what we will see in terms of qualifying and the run for the pole. Right now, as it stands, I'll give you the top 10. Joseph Newgarden, the fastest so far today, 226.632 miles an hour for the two-time defending champion. Second fastest is Scott Dixon, followed by Connor Daly. He did that lap about 2 hours ago. Pata O'Ward is fourth, and then the fifth fastest is Ryan Hunter-Ray. Alex Palou, Colton Herta, Christian Rasmussen, David Malukas, and Scott McLaughlin, who I think is going to flex a lot of muscle over the course of the next couple of weeks. Scott McLaughlin is the 10th fastest today. Practice will continue until 6 o'clock, and then obviously tomorrow, as we talked about, get a little extra boost. Everybody will get excited because you'll see some speeds popping up around the 2:30 mark, and people will be like, holy cow, here it goes. And so far, still early to determine whether or not Chevy or Honda has the straight line speed advantage for the run for the pole, but it's one of the things that we will watch for tomorrow. All right, John's up next. Thanks so much to Tony East. Thanks so much to Greg Rakestraw for filling in, and Al Unser Jr. back at noon tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.